Alrighty, it's been way too long, but we are finally back, primarily because the Undisputed community have called upon me to give my opinion on Steel City's latest update, which includes the long-awaited career mode as well as the ability to create our own fighters. Now, if you watched my previous video, you know that I do not hold back when it comes to constructive criticism. I am a big believer in brutal honesty, because in a world full of yes men and snake oil salesmen, being objectively brutally honest is the only way things get done. In summary, and to avoid beating a dead horse, the Undisputed team have a habit of taking one step forward and 3 steps back. Instead of investing in specialists, Ash Habib invests in salesmen. But that's neither here or there when, let's face it, the documented lackluster progress of Undisputed, formerly known as ESBC, over the course of 4 years speaks for itself. With that said, let's not dwell on the past. The big question with this newly touted career mode, as well as the ability to create your own fighter, are Steel City finally back on track to creating the greatest boxing sim of all time? Let's find out. We begin with the character creation mode. Off the bat, you'll be asked to choose your difficulty. Being that I am a man, I of course chose the hardest difficulty, Undisputed. Keep this in mind for later. First, we cover the general details regarding your fighter's gender, your name, age, and nationality. Sadly, the nicknames available are pretty dookie, with the likes of the Bulldozer, Powder Keg, the Myth. Jesus, it's not a big deal, but don't make it mandatory for us to select them. Now, the bulk of your character's aesthetic would be defined by the weight class of choice as well as their body mass. So the higher percentage of body mass means less muscle and more fat, and the lower your body mass, you'll appear to be both disheveled and ripped, almost like you're going through a bad weight cut. You can further refine your muscle density and the color of your skin, but you can't change the shape of certain muscles, for example your lats or shoulder muscles. Point being, you won't be creating the physique of a Frank Bruno. Thankfully, it is the facial mode editor where this character creator mode really shines. Now, it does have some limitations when it comes to the structure of the skull or the alignment and size of teeth. With that said, this is easily the most robust character facial editor I've come across in any game, let alone a fighting game. For example, you don't just make a forehead large or small, we are editing every facet of the forehead. The same applies to your eyes, or the ridge of your nose, even the outer regions of your nostrils. You get my drift. This was my best rendition of Errol Spence. He looks like a plastic surgery victim, because there's only so much stretching and pulling that you can do with the base model. Once you have their structure in place, you can further add bells and whistles, such as your hair, tattoos, as well as some changes to your boxing attire. Sadly, this is the aspect of customization where things just get really silly. We are limited to 11 facial hairstyles and 14 hairstyles. The problem is, these hairstyles cannot be further refined, as was alluded to in the original character creator demo.
We want you to be able to change those hairstyles. So as I change this slider, you'll be able to actually see his hair and the individual follicles changing.
You don't get the option to be completely bald, and the braided hairstyles available are more suited to females. The same lack of variety applies to the tattoos. Surely you could have reached out to professional tattoo artists who would have jumped to the occasion to showcase their catalogue of work. Luckily, boxing attire does not suffer from the same lack of care. We are offered a plethora of styles for shorts and boots, where you can apply various color combinations, which by the end leave you feeling like you've created your own bespoke boxing attire. Last of all, we can choose our fighting style, which includes the Philly shell. You can also stick to traditional stances, as well as replicating Muhammad Ali, Alexander Usyk, Deontay Wilder, Roy Jones Jr., the list goes on. Overall, it's a great effort from Steel City. Let's hope they listen to feedback and further refine it before official release. They won't. We move on to our career, and before we get things started, we first have to assemble our team, starting with our coach. Now, let me explain this in layman's terms. The more established and skilled your coach is, will result in your skill set leveling up faster as a fighter. You'll start off with a limited budget, so the more fights you win, the more money you make, which means as your journey progresses, you can invest in better coaching. To start things off, your initial coach will enter you in a tournament to assess your skill set. Now, what you'll find during this career mode is that you'll be going up against what I believe to be procedurally generated character creation. At least I hope that is the case, since I fail to believe that a designer went to the effort to make them look this bad. Now you might say this is not a big deal. For me personally, this breaks the immersion of being part of a serious tournament as well as being part of a career which leads me to a title against authentic fighters such as Terence Crawford and Kell Brook. But we'll touch more on this throughout the journey. In my initial match, my stats were extremely low, which resorted to me moving at a snail's pace. And for these initial matches where I have no experience, this is a good thing. The game is encouraging you to use boxing fundamentals, footwork, jabs, straights. These were my weapons of choice, where I would reserve my energy to land hooks and uppercuts when my opponent lacked durability. Now, was this a fun experience? No. However, at this point I was of the understanding that the more I gain experience, eventually I'd be able to use my full arsenal of weapons, and the AI in theory would improve in skill set. Hold that thought. Anywho, with 4 wins under my belt, I win the tournament, and as a result of my efforts, I'm greeted with the following. Now, I fully understand this isn't Fight Night Champion levels of story mode. However, the lack of high quality presentation really does take away from the immersion when there is a moment of accomplishment. You have the resource, and in 2024 there really isn't an excuse. And listen, if you disagree with me, let me know why in the comments section. Now that we've found success in this tournament, we now have the ability to hire a cut man, as well as the choice of several managers who are now interested in taking us into the pro leagues. Yeah, fun. So, why do we need them? Well, in layman's terms again, the cut man will heal you in and outside of the ring, whilst the manager's skills will influence the likelihood of getting a better fight. The more success you have in your career, the better staff you can hire. Now, it's here where the simulation aspect of the game really starts to take place. And I'm gonna be frank, it's not for everyone. You sign up to a gym you can afford, and then you simulate a week of training by pressing on this panel. You have the choice of simulating losing weight or sharpening your fighting techniques. And you'll be doing all of this with your imagination, because you do not actually spar, jump rope, or practice techniques on a punching bag. Yes, it's a traditional simulation game. I would argue that it's an excuse to avoid adding more gameplay mechanics. Both Fight Night and UFC Undisputed franchises included extremely basic training games, their purpose to add to the immersion. Anywho, each time you press the button, a week's worth of training is completed, until eventually your ability to negotiate a fight is activated, and this is a feature I like a lot. I can negotiate my opponent, my purse cut, decide whether or not to invest in fighter insurance. Maybe I train less weeks and save money. The problem, of course, being that if you do not train enough, you're most likely not prepared for the fight. But these are the risks that you have the ability to take, and they will weigh on your shoulders in the fight itself. Once you've negotiated your deal, you can then allocate training or media duties in the lead up to your fight, and the choices you make will determine your energy levels, fight sharpness, as well as ensuring that you make weight on the day of the fight. With the boring logistics out the way, there is one key component which either makes or breaks the career mode: core gameplay, the boxing mechanics themselves. So with that, let me run you through my experience climbing the ranks on the hardest difficulty and attaining 2 belts. Now, my initial pro fights would be scheduled between 4 to 6 rounds. I wasn't expecting much from my early opponents, but they were far too inactive for my liking. If you choose to retreat or fight on the outside, you'll often find the AI remaining stationary, sidestepping away from you, throwing strikes when you're clearly out of range. All in all, it will be a walk in the park. That is, of course, unless you throw a hook, of which they are programmed to counter, and just like that, they have the power of Isaac Frost. When you're dazed, they will run up to you and give you the touch of death, literally. And it's from there that you learn that not only are you handicapped in terms of your stamina, but the AI will not rely on boxing fundamentals to get the better of you. Instead, the AI relies on counters. To be frank, I can only speak for myself, but the first 15 games, I didn't feel a sense of challenge. And anytime I did get rocked, I simply felt cheated. There were way too many scenarios where the AI were whiffing shots, leaving themselves wide open for the counter. When dazed, the AI would lack survival instinct and stand still, waiting to get finished off. Now, on the flip side, you'll also come up across aggressive fighters. For example, this Caucasian man who goes by the name Keyshawn Williams. Fighters like this that made me want to quit playing, not because they were difficult, instead because their movement made me nauseous. Name one fighter that throws a backstep straight like this, that diagonally dodges like this, that makes love with their opponent like this. Yes, the key boxing mechanics that the community has been complaining about for over a year, the developers decided to make them the weapons of choice. And if you think I'm exaggerating, watch as Keyshawn Williams spams me with jabs, makes me his wife, then follows up with the touch of death. Should I continue? This is a black Indian man named Vladislav Kachuk from the Ukraine. He stands with his hands down, mouth and eyes wide open. When dazed, he becomes an immovable object, blocking power punches with one arm and then making me his wife. After dominating him for 5 rounds, I counter with a straight and end up getting flatlined by a standard hook. Upsets like this happen in real boxing once in a while. The problem is, the AI relies on being overpowered as opposed to beating you with skill. Now, on my road to the title, I ended up fighting another black Indian fighter named Wadi Han Yuan from Vietnam. He gave me the touch of death and made me his wife, but I still got the win. And to be frank, outside of a couple of knockdowns, I dominated my way through the ranks, fighting against well-established fighters such as Terence Crawford, and yet again feeling underwhelmed due to the nonsensical AI decisions he was making in the ring, staring at me with his hands down, whiffing shots, strafing and dodging for no reason, and staring once again, rinse and repeat. With each fight, I was going through the motions. Pressing a button repeatedly to simulate training was becoming a chore. Renewing team contracts, as well as negotiating fight contracts, the initial buzz had worn off 8 fights in. Now, with that being said, I stuck it out until I fought for the Steel City belt. And on the hardest difficulty, I was up against the legend himself, Arturo Gatti. Except, once again, I was reminded that these are merely skins. Gatti, just like Crawford, does not possess the threat or ringmanship of his real-life counterpart. On the hardest difficulty and fighting for the belt, throughout the entire career there's been no sense of progression other than having increased stamina, which in turn allowed me to starch Arturo Gatti by the 6th round. 36 fights, 36 training sessions. With all that time, effort and dedication, I was finally the Steel City champion. Which of course, when you become a champion, you get the special ending. It's very nice of Steel City to honor the graphics of Sega Mega Drive. The problem is, I think your demographic are expecting something better than what was available 14 years ago in Fight Night Champions career mode. When Steel City stated almost a year ago that they're prioritizing the career mode over fundamental gameplay issues in online play, the expectations are high. After 4 years of development, what we end up with is a high-quality fighter creation mode, a mediocre career mode, and broken fundamental mechanics, of which the development team either struggle to fix, or alternatively, the project itself may be in the wrong hands. If it is the latter, then it's up to Ash Habib to take the bull by the horns. A quick plan of action would be to sit with those within your team who have criticized the game, prioritize amongst yourselves what needs to be fixed, and in turn evaluate with your development team the effort required to make those fixes. And lastly, to the content creators who are jumping on the bandwagon, showcasing the career mode and taking advantage of the character creation mode, you can still find a balance in offering critique as well as entertaining your audience. We've already seen how this works with EA UFC, and I'm sure you've noticed Martial Mind is jumping on board. Despite declaring multiple times how bored he is of the game remains in the same state, yet here he is capitalizing on the career mode purely for monetary gain. If Undisputed in its current state finds success based on influencer hyperbole, then Steel City will have no reason to fix the game. So with that, let's hold each other accountable and set a good example for the community. A big thank you to all who have subscribed and liked the video. For those of you who have played the career mode, do you think I'm being too harsh? If so, let me know in the comments. Have a great weekend, take care, peace.